There is a specific kind of person you have probably met. Maybe you have been them. They talk about what they are going to build, create, or become, and they talk about it with genuine passion, real detail, and total conviction. Ask them about their goals and they light up. But something strange happens when you check back in 6 months, or a year, or 3 years later. Nothing has moved. Not because life got in the way. Not because they stopped caring. But because the dream is still perfectly intact and untouched. This video is not about lazy people. It is about something far more fascinating. It is about the psychology of why brilliant, ambitious, imaginative people stay completely frozen while their biggest visions sit waiting, and why the mind that holds those visions is often the exact same mind quietly working against them. Here is the question that should unsettle you a little. If a person genuinely wants something, success, a creative life, financial freedom, a transformed version of themselves, why would they not pursue it? The obvious answer is laziness. But psychology says that answer is almost always wrong. Because if you sit with someone who dreams big and does nothing, you will notice a few things immediately. They are not passive people. They think constantly. They research, they analyze, they plan. In many cases, they know more about the thing they want than people who are already doing it. So why does all of that energy never leave the inside of their head? 3 questions sit at the center of this. What is the brain actually getting from the dream? What is the brain afraid of losing by acting? And what does that dream secretly protect? The answers are stranger than you would expect. Start with the neuroscience, because this is where the trap begins. When you vividly imagine a desired outcome, your name on a best-selling book, a thriving business, a completely different version of your daily life, your brain does not treat that as fiction. It responds with a measurable release of dopamine. The same neurochemical reward that comes from actual achievement arrives early, triggered by imagination alone. Psychologist Gabrielle Ettingen spent years studying what she called positive fantasizing, the tendency to mentally simulate a successful future, and found something counterintuitive. Vivid positive visualization, on its own, consistently reduced motivation and follow-through. Not because hope is bad, but because the brain had already consumed the reward before any real effort began. Derek Sivers extended this through his research on goal sharing. When people announce their ambitions publicly and receive affirmation from others, that social recognition partially satisfies the psychological need that achievement was supposed to fulfill. The applause arrives before the performance. After that, the performance feels almost redundant. This is the first trap. The dream is not a starting line. For many people, neurochemically, it is the finish line, just wearing the costume of a beginning. And the loop reinforces itself. Every time you return to the dream, refine it, expand it, share it, add new details to it, you get another small reward. The brain learns, quietly, that this is a reliable source of good feeling. Why would it voluntarily trade something that already feels successful for the uncertainty and discomfort of actually trying? The answer, for many people, is that it would not. Not without deliberate interruption. Not without understanding what is actually happening underneath the ambition. There is a reason the most disciplined, productive people in any field are rarely the ones talking constantly about their vision. Not because they lack vision, but because they have learned to be suspicious of the way talking about it feels like doing it. They have felt that trap and chosen differently. But dopamine alone does not explain the full picture. The deeper mechanism is identity protection, and this one is almost invisible while it is happening. For a person who has not acted on their dream, that dream serves a very specific psychological function. It preserves a self-concept. As long as they have not tried, they have not failed. And as long as they have not failed, they remain, in their own internal story, someone with unlimited potential. The unlaunched business is not just an idea sitting in a notebook. It is a psychological shield. It lets the person say, to themselves and quietly to the world, I could be extraordinary. I just have not started yet. That single word, yet, does enormous invisible work. Carol Dweck's landmark research on fixed versus growth mindsets illuminates why this matters so much. People with fixed mindsets, those who believe talent is something you either have or you do not, are especially vulnerable to this pattern. For them, failure is not information. It is verdict. It does not say your approach was wrong. It says you are not good enough. And when failure carries that weight, the safest move is never to be judged at all. Action, paradoxically, threatens identity. To act is to receive feedback from reality. Reality does not care about your self-concept. The person who acts discovers whether their talent is real, whether their timing was right, whether the world wants what they have to offer. The person who only dreams never has to find out. And closely connected to this is imposter syndrome, the quiet, persistent conviction that once you act, once you produce real work and put it in front of real people, the truth will emerge, that you are not, in fact, as capable or special as you needed to believe. The dream keeps the question permanently open. And an open question, no matter how uncomfortable, is always less devastating than a closed answer that goes the wrong way. So the brain keeps the dream alive precisely because it keeps the verdict from ever arriving. And here is the part that most people miss: the brain treats this not as cowardice, but as wisdom. It is genuinely protecting you, just from the wrong things. Now here is where it gets strange. Because the very traits that most people associate with ambition, passion, imagination, high standards, deep thinking, are often the exact same traits that make inaction worse, not better. Consider perfectionism. On the surface it looks like conscientiousness. It sounds like standards. But Albert Ellis, the psychologist behind rational emotive behavior therapy, described perfectionism not as a quality standard but as a fear response. The perfectionist is not waiting for conditions to be ideal. They are waiting for conditions to feel safe. And the threshold keeps moving because it was never designed to be crossed. It was designed to justify not crossing it. Perfectionism is avoidance dressed in ambition's clothing. Look closely enough and you will notice that the perfectionist standards almost always apply to what they are about to produce, not to what they have already consumed or imagined. They will spend 8 hours researching the perfect approach and produce nothing. The standard was never about output. It was about postponement. Then there is what Ellis called low frustration tolerance, a genuine, visceral discomfort with the early stages of any real endeavor. The confusion of being a beginner. The invisibility that precedes recognition. The tedium before mastery arrives. The imagined version of the dream skips all of this entirely. It begins at the point of arrival. But real action begins in the messy middle, and for many big dreamers, the gap between the dream they imagined and the reality they encounter is so disorienting that they retreat at the first friction, back into the clean, comfortable world of the vision. There is another layer that rarely gets discussed: the social performance of ambition. Talking about the novel you are writing is significantly more interesting than admitting you are not writing one. Describing your entrepreneurial vision makes you compelling in conversation. The dream is social currency, and it costs nothing to spend. Over time, and often without the person noticing, the dream stops being a destination and starts being an identity. The version of themselves that others respond to when they describe what they will build becomes addictive. Actual doing threatens that persona. Because doing produces imperfect, public, criticizable results. Dreaming produces only admiration. Martin Seligman's theory of learned helplessness adds yet another dimension. People who have tried before, and been humiliated, ignored, or consistently blocked, can develop a body-level conviction that effort does not produce results. This is not a logical belief they consciously hold. It is a felt truth embedded in repeated experience, and it governs behavior quietly, even when the person consciously believes they are ready to try. Modern life has made all of this significantly worse. Social media presents the polished endpoints of other people's journeys, the published book, the scaled company, the completely transformed life, without any of the years of invisible, uncomfortable, unglamorous work that preceded them. The big dreamer sees this, compares their unstarted beginning to someone else's finished middle, and concludes they are already behind. Comparison becomes a reason not to start rather than a reason to move. And so the dream grows larger in the imagination, compensating for the smallness they feel, while actual action retreats further into the distance. This is where it becomes personal. Think about the last time you had a clear, exciting idea about something you wanted to do or change. Notice what happened in the hours and days after that clarity arrived. Did you research it? Did you tell someone about it? Did you feel, at some point, like you had already partially accomplished it just by thinking it through thoroughly enough? That feeling of productive momentum, the sensation of moving, without a single real-world action having taken place. That is the pattern, running exactly as designed. If yes, that is the loop. And the loop is running right now, in almost every area of life where you feel stuck but inspired. Here is what the research consistently shows about what actually works, and it is almost the opposite of what most motivational content tells you. More inspiration is often the last thing a stuck dreamer needs. It feeds the dreaming mechanism without ever touching the action problem. What tends to work is radical reduction of scale. Not launch the business, but send one email today. Not write the book, but write one paragraph before anything else. The purpose of the small action is not strategic. It is neurological. It interrupts the loop. It gives your nervous system evidence that doing is survivable, that imperfection does not destroy you, that reality, while harder than the dream, is also more rewarding in ways the dream can never replicate. The other crucial shift is decoupling your identity from the outcome. As long as acting feels like a referendum on your worth, as long as trying and failing means you are not who you believed yourself to be, the safest choice will always be not to try. This is often the work that requires patience, and sometimes external support. But it is the actual center of the problem. The question is not how to get more motivated. The question is how to make doing feel less like a verdict on being. Psychologist William James observed something that cuts against almost every productivity framework: action does not follow motivation. Motivation follows action. You do not wait to feel ready and then start. You start, imperfectly, and readiness builds as a consequence of showing up. The emotion catches up to the behavior, never the other way around. This is one of the most consistently supported findings in behavioral psychology, and one of the most consistently ignored pieces of advice, because it requires acting before you feel like it. And that feels wrong. It feels backward. But that feeling of wrongness is itself part of the pattern. Big dreamers who learn to act often become remarkable, precisely because they already carry the vision. What was missing was never desire. It was the willingness to let reality meet the dream, and to survive that encounter. So here are the 3 things to take from this. First, the brain rewards imagination before effort. The dopamine that comes from vividly envisioning success reduces the urgency to pursue it. The dream can quietly become the destination without you ever noticing, and every time you return to it, every time you refine it in your mind or describe it to someone, the loop tightens. Second, inaction is often identity protection. As long as you have not tried, your potential remains theoretically unlimited. The person who never acts never has to discover what they are actually made of, and the brain considers that a safety win. Third, the solution is not scale, it is interruption. One small action, imperfect, uncomfortable, real, breaks the neurological loop that keeps dreaming in place of doing. You do not overcome this pattern with more vision. You overcome it by giving reality a single, small opportunity to surprise you. The tragedy is not that people dream. Dreams are the raw material of every remarkable thing that has ever been built. The tragedy is that for so many people, the dream becomes the whole story, a story that gets richer and more detailed over time while remaining, permanently, unbegun. If something in this video felt familiar, if you recognized yourself in any part of it, that recognition itself is not nothing. Awareness is a starting point. Not the finish line. Not a plan. Just a door. What you do next is the interesting part. If this gave you something to think about, the subscribe button is there, and we will keep bringing you the kind of content that most people have never heard explained quite like this.